Today we're looking at Theme 2 Rights and Responsibilities of the AQA Citizenship GCSE course. We're looking at rights and responsibilities within the legal system, and in particular, what are the police powers? In previous videos, we have looked at the key words to remember, the structure of the police force, including roles and ranks, the Metropolitan Police and Police and Criminal Commissioners, what is the Police and Criminal Evidence Act of 1984, what the powers are of the police, including a scenario-based activity, and now we're going to be moving on to look at 3 case studies. The first case study we're going to look at is the Guildford 4. It refers to 4 people who were arrested in 1974 and accused of being involved in an IRA bombing in Guildford, in which 5 people were killed. In order to know what the IRA was, you need to know about the conflict between Northern Ireland and Britain. The conflict involved Unionists, who were Irish people who wanted to stay a part of the United Kingdom, and nationalists, who were Irish people who did not want to stay a part of the United Kingdom and wanted independence. This conflict gave rise to violence on both sides. The IRA is an example of a terrorist group who committed violent acts in both Ireland and Britain, and who wanted an independent Ireland breaking away from the United Kingdom. Jerry Conlon was one of the 4 arrested. He was sentenced to life imprisonment on the basis of false confessions made after days of mistreatment by the police. In 1989, the Court of Appeal overturned the convictions as evidence that proved that he had an alibi was not given to the defence team by the police. There was also evidence of police fabricating statements which were used as evidence in court. He was compensated just over £500,000, and in 2005, a previous Prime Minister, Tony Blair, gave him a personal apology. He went on to campaign for those who are wrongly accused, and in 1993 he and others set up a pressure group called Miscarriages of Justice Organisation. This is an example of a case study that you can use for the Rights and Responsibilities unit when we're exploring the powers of the police, but you can also use this as a case study for the Politics and Participation unit when you're looking at active citizenship, pressure groups and campaigning. The next case study is called the Hillsborough Disaster. In 1989, 96 Liverpool fans were crushed to death and hundreds more injured at the Sheffield Wednesday Stadium, which was hosting an FA Cup football match. The inquiry into the disaster, led by Lord Chief Justice Taylor, established that the main cause was a failure of police crowd control. Relatives and friends of those who died didn't believe that the full facts of the day had been brought to the public's attention, and campaigned for more information. 20 years after the tragedy, the Home Secretary requested the police to provide all the files they had containing the evidence. The Hillsborough Independent Panel was set up, and it reported that the police deliberately altered more than 160 witness statements in an attempt to blame Liverpool fans for the fatal crush. It also reported that the police did not manage the crowds the way they were meant to. 41 out of the 96 could have survived if the police did manage the crowd effectively. These disclosures led to apologies from the Prime Minister as well as the Sun newspaper over comments made about the fans who died. In 2014, a fresh inquiry into the Hillsborough deaths took place. In 2016, the inquest jury decided the 96 who had died at Hillsborough had been unlawfully killed, and that the police match commander on the day was responsible for manslaughter by gross negligence. What we mean by negligence is the failure to take proper care over something. The Crown Prosecution Service were able to consider proceedings against individuals and corporate bodies involved with the deaths of the 96. The role of the Crown Prosecution Service is something we cover in another session. It also shows that a group of concerned citizens, together with the media and political support, can eventually seek out the truth and use the legal system to achieve justice. Here's an example of another case study that you can apply to a range of different topics in citizenship. You can explore the role of the CPS, you can look at the role of police and the abuse of their powers, you can explore how a group of citizens work together with the media and gain political support in order to achieve justice, and you can also look at how the media was involved in portraying Liverpool fans. The freedom of the press and the media is a topic covered in Life in Modern Britain, and therefore this is a case study where you can look at the freedom of the press as well as their influence. The final case study is the Stephen Lawrence case study. Stephen Lawrence was murdered by racists in South London in 1993. Due to institutionalised racism and the failure of the police to investigate the murder, justice was not served. His mother, Doreen Lawrence, had campaigned to ensure justice for her son's murder. British newspapers supported her campaign, and she also gained the support of Nelson Mandela. The publicity this case received highlighted the issue of institutionalised racism in the police force against the black community. Stephen Lawrence's death and the campaigning that took place afterwards led to a public inquiry and ultimately the Macpherson report. Recommendations in this report have had a knock-on effect on police powers and how those powers are carried out, as well as the issue of institutionalised racism within the police force. Since 1993, the London Metropolitan Police Service has increased ethnic minority recruitment from 2.3% to 10.4%. Stop and search powers have been and are being reviewed, and the campaign transformed the way police deal with murder, family liaison, and the investigation of hate crime. Doreen Lawrence is now a peer who sits in the House of Lords. Again, this case study can be used across many topics in citizenship. It can be used in the rights and responsibilities topic to explore police powers. It can also be used in the politics and participation topic of active citizenship when exploring the campaign that Doreen Lawrence held with the support of high-figure individuals as well as British newspapers, particularly looking at how a campaign can be successful. It can also be applied to politics and participation when looking at the role of peers who sit in the House of Lords. You can even apply it to life in modern Britain when exploring institutionalised racism. Be aware of the difference between racism and institutionalised racism. Institutionalised racism refers to the type of racism expressed in social and political institutions and organisations. Institutionalised racism refers to the processes and systems that are in place that do not provide equal opportunities and equality to all individuals. So, for example, institutionalised racism within the police force does not suggest that every single police officer is racist. What it suggests is that the systems and the processes that exist in the police force are racist and do not uphold equality for all. There are quite a few case studies in citizenship, and it's important for you to know a good few of them so that you can apply them in your 8-mark responses. In order to get those top marks, you need to provide evidence, and this is where case studies are useful. You do not need to know all your case studies inside out and in huge amounts of detail, but you should know basic information and be able to apply it to the correct questions. I like to encourage my students to use the WWOH strategy. This involves what, when, where, who, why, outcome, and how. Let me teach you how to use this. When you have information about a case study, you can answer the questions as you go. So if we're answering what, that's asking what happened. Stephen Lawrence murdered by racist gang. All it takes is one sentence, a couple of bits of information. Next we move on and we look at when. So 1993. Where? It took place in South London. Who? So Stephen Lawrence. You may want to refer to Doreen Lawrence and her role, possibly even Nelson Mandela, supported campaign. Why? So you can refer to the fact that this was due to a racist attack, but you've already mentioned the fact that there was a racist gang who attacked him. What you should do is apply this why to the issue. So the issue is institutionalised racism in the police force. The police failed to investigate the murder, and so justice wasn't served. So that is your reason. Let's put these in another colour so you can see it. Outcome. You can refer to some of the facts here. So increase in ethnic minority recruitment, transformation of how police deal with murder and hate crime. You only need a few points here. And to answer the question how, I think you should be exploring how will you link this case study to different topics in citizenship. So for example, you could link the Stephen Lawrence case study to rights and responsibilities, police powers, role of the CPS, as the Crown Prosecution Service did not have enough evidence to charge any of the attackers who murdered Stephen Lawrence because the police did not investigate the crime and therefore evidence was not properly gathered. You could also explore politics and participation and look at active citizenship and campaigns, successful campaigns actually, due to high-profile people involved in the media's support. You can also look at the role of peers in the House of Lords, Doreen Lawrence, and so on. I do suggest that you make sure you know how each case study applies to a variety of topics in citizenship. You may not remember all the case studies when you go into your exam, so even if you remember some of them or most of them and you can apply them across the board, that would be great. Feel free to use this strategy, try and use it on a flashcard, see if you can use a number of flashcards, the question on one side and the answer on the other if you want, or just make sure you have this key information for every single case study using the WWOH strategy. Another key bit of advice that I tell my students is number your information rather than bullet point it. Your brain is more likely to remember the numbers rather than the bullet points, meaning that you might go into an exam and say, oh, I remember there were 7 points that I need to remember about the Stephen Lawrence case study, and your brain will automatically use that as a cue to remember those 7 points. Whereas if these were just bullet points, big round circles, you will not remember how many points you had to make. I hope this strategy helps, and we'll be rounding off this session in the next video. Next, we'll move on to looking at the role of the Independent Police Complaints Commission and the Independent Office for Police Conduct. Finally, we'll look at the impact of budget cuts to the police force.